There's something happening right now that doesn't make the news the way it probably should. Across college campuses, in late-night dorm rooms, on the back seats of city buses, and in the quiet corners of lives that look perfectly put together on the outside, young people are waking up. Not just waking up in the sense of becoming politically aware or socially conscious, though that's happening too. I'm talking about something deeper. Something that can't be fully captured in a tweet or reduced to an aesthetic. I'm talking about spiritual awakening. And I believe it is one of the most profound and underreported movements of our generation. Now, before we go any further, I want to be clear about what I mean by spiritual awakening, because the phrase gets thrown around a lot. It can mean different things depending on who you ask. For some, it's a radical encounter with God, a moment where the presence of Jesus becomes so undeniably real that nothing looks the same afterward. For others, it's a slow dissolution of the ego, a growing sense that they are not just their thoughts, their traumas, or their social media profiles. For still others, it's a hunger, a restlessness that refuses to be satisfied by anything this world is selling. At its core, spiritual awakening is the moment when a person begins to ask the questions that cannot be Googled. Who am I, really? Why am I here? Is there something beyond what I can see and touch and scroll through? And more urgently, why does everything feel so hollow? That hollowness is important. We have to talk about it because I think it's actually the door that awakening walks through. Young people today, Gen Z, late millennials, have grown up as the most connected generation in human history and simultaneously some of the loneliest. The statistics are startling. Rates of anxiety, depression, and existential dread among people aged 18 to 30 have climbed steadily over the last decade. And here's what's interesting about that. These aren't just mental health crises in the clinical sense. Many young people themselves describe what they're experiencing as a spiritual crisis. There is a deep, gnawing awareness that something is missing, not just in their personal lives, but in the world itself. That something has gone terribly wrong, that we are all running very fast in a direction nobody actually chose. And that awareness, that sacred discomfort, is often where awakening begins. Think about it. You can numb almost anything with entertainment. You can distract yourself from grief with Netflix. You can silence loneliness with notifications. You can blur the edges of emptiness with substances, with ambition, with busyness. And for a while, it works. But there comes a point, and many young people are hitting this point, where the noise stops being enough, where you find yourself at 2 a.m., in a room full of everything you thought you wanted, feeling absolutely nothing. And in that nothing, a question surfaces. A question that has echoed through every generation since the beginning of human consciousness. Is this all there is? That question is holy. I genuinely believe that. It's not a sign of weakness or instability. It's a sign that the soul is awake enough to demand more than what the surface of life can offer. And young people are responding to that question in ways that are both ancient and entirely new. Some are turning to faith, and not the watered-down, culturally inherited kind. Something real, something desperate and hungry and willing to be changed. There has been a remarkable resurgence of genuine Christian faith among young people in certain pockets of the world. We've seen it in the revival that broke out at Asbury University in early 2023. Where students gathered to worship and simply did not leave for days. No program, no celebrity speaker, no lights and fog machines. Just people who had run out of substitutes and found themselves on their knees before a God they weren't entirely sure they believed in, and walked away absolutely certain. Stories like that don't emerge from a generation that's spiritually dead. They emerge from a generation that's starving. But the awakening isn't limited to churches or to Christianity. There is a broader spiritual searching happening that crosses denominational and religious lines. Young people are reading mystical theology and ancient philosophy. They're exploring prayer, meditation, fasting, practices that their grandparents might have seen as old-fashioned but that now feel, to a burned-out 24-year-old, revolutionary. They're asking questions about the nature of consciousness, about what happens after death, about whether there is a God who actually cares about them as individuals. These are not casual intellectual exercises. They are the anguished, earnest questions of people whose souls have outgrown their circumstances. And then there's the deconstruction movement, which is its own form of awakening, even when it's painful. A huge number of young people who grew up in religious households have spent their early adult years peeling back layers of inherited belief, asking whether what they were taught was actually true, whether the faith of their parents was theirs to keep or theirs to interrogate. This process is often misread as people walking away from God. Sometimes that's true, but more often, I think, it's people walking toward a more honest, more costly, more personal version of belief. Deconstruction, at its best, is not the end of faith. It is faith refusing to stay comfortable. It is the spiritual equivalent of a plant breaking through concrete, violent, disruptive, and deeply alive. There's also a generational dimension to all of this that we can't ignore. Young people today are inheriting a world that is, by any honest measure, in trouble. Climate anxiety is real. Political disillusionment is real. The sense that institutions, governments, corporations, even churches have failed them is real. And when the external structures that were supposed to provide meaning and stability collapse or disappoint, people are forced inward. They are forced to find in themselves, or in something beyond themselves, the anchor that the world couldn't provide. That is again a form of awakening. Suffering, especially collective suffering, has always been a catalyst for spiritual depth. The mystics knew this. The Psalms are full of it. There is a grace hidden inside the breaking. Something else I find remarkable is the role that honesty is playing in this generation's spirituality. Young people have a finely tuned radar for inauthenticity. They have grown up in a world of curated personas and performative wellness and brand-managed everything. They are tired of it. And when they encounter faith, or spirituality, or community, they need it to be real. They need the people leading them to have actually suffered and actually wrestled and actually found something on the other side. The polished have-it-all-together presentation of Christianity or any other spiritual tradition lands hollow for them. But raw, honest testimony, vulnerability about doubt, the willingness to sit in the unknown together, that reaches them. That is actually reaching them. I want to speak directly now to anyone watching this who is in the middle of their own awakening, because I think you deserve to hear something clearly. What you are feeling is not a malfunction. The restlessness is not a disorder. The hunger that won't go away. The questions that keep surfacing. The sense that there has to be more. These are not symptoms of something wrong with you. They are signs of something right. They are the sound of your soul refusing to sleepwalk through a life it was made for more than. The awakening process is almost never comfortable. It often begins with a loss, a relationship, a belief system, a version of yourself you thought was permanent. It can feel like grief. It can feel like standing in a room where all the furniture has been moved and the lights have been turned off. Disorienting, scary, but there is a reason the mystics across every tradition have described this season as necessary, as sacred, as the very threshold of becoming who you actually are. And for those of us who believe in a personal God, a God who is not just a philosophical concept, but a Father who sees individuals, this season carries the most extraordinary promise that the discomfort is not accidental, that the timing of your awakening is not random, that the one who made you is working in the breaking as much as in the building. There's a verse in the book of Joel, ancient words written to a devastated people, that says God will restore the years the locusts have eaten, years of numbing, years of performance, years of believing lies about who you are and what your life is for. There is a generation right now that has had years consumed by comparison culture, by isolation, by trauma, by the sheer noise of modern life, and there is a stirring, a genuine spiritual stirring, that suggests restoration is not just possible, but underway. I want to end with something practical, because I think a lot of content about spiritual things stays beautifully vague and never actually helps you move. So here it is. If you are in the middle of an awakening, or you sense one beginning, the most important thing you can do is create space for it. That sounds simple, but it is genuinely countercultural. Space means silence. It means putting your phone down long enough to hear what's underneath the noise. It means being honest with yourself and with at least one other person about what's actually going on inside you. It means being willing to stay in the discomfort instead of immediately medicating it. It means praying, even if you're not sure you believe, because the willingness to ask is itself a form of faith. It means reading things that have mattered to people for centuries, not just things that trended this week. It means finding community, real, imperfect, honest community, because spiritual awakening is not meant to happen alone. This generation is not spiritually dead. Far from it. I believe this generation is spiritually hungry, in a way that could change the world. If the hunger is met with truth, and with love, and with the kind of grace that doesn't flinch at questions. If you've been feeling the pull towards something deeper, something truer, something that costs more, and offers infinitely more in return, don't ignore it. Follow it. The awakening is not an accident, and you are not alone in it. If this video resonated with you, share it with someone who's in the middle of their own searching. Drop a comment below. I genuinely want to hear your story. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because we're going to keep having conversations like this. Real ones. See you in the next video. Thank you.